my problems and figuring out getting through some of my challenges and my circumstances, I'm going to have to hear from God. So one of the keys is we have to avoid being hearing impaired. So we can't take our ability to hear for granted. We can't take it for granted. You know, the fact that, well, we have two types of hearing. We have our natural ear and we have an inner ear. So a lot of times when you sit around and you know, we always say this, something told me. Well, it's not something, it's God telling you. And depending on what you allow inside you, you figure after a while, I'll use me, but after a while when I started to hang out and kick it up, I was like, in high school, I have to say high school. Well, once I started exposing myself to all this other stuff, it was kind of hard to hear from God. So if God started talking, I didn't know if it was God, if it was me, if it was them. There's just so many voices. And then, you know, especially if you make the grave mistake of exposing yourself to drugs or anything like that, you start hearing voices. So again, look, which we talked about the other week, getting all the voices out of your head, but it starts to affect your hearing because you become hearing impaired. Hearing impaired, you know, people that lose their hearing, they call them hearing impaired, they lose their hearing. So it's not like they can't hear at all, it's just that it's impaired, it's dull. It's like, you know, somebody calls you and you're like, what'd you say? Huh? Huh? I can't hear you. Well, a lot of times God is talking with that still small voice, and if we keep our hearing sharp, we can hear. So we're gonna, let's go to Matthew 13. Matthew 13. Again, we're talking about how to hear from God, and we're crossing over into avoid being hearing impaired, not taking our hearing for granted. In Matthew 13, verse 9, it says, you know, this is a passage that's repeated over and over and over in the Bible. It says, who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So it says, okay, if you have ears, the purpose of ears is hearing. So it says, then use your ears to hear. And it says ears, plural. So it's not just talking about it's not just talking about your outer ears, but it's talking about your inner ear. So if you have ears, please use them for hearing. That's verse 9. And then we'll go to verse 15. It says, because when he made the comment, it's not assumed that people are utilizing their ears to hear. So just because you have them, sometimes you can take it for granted. Okay, what do I have? Verse 14. It says, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, or it says Isaias, but it's referencing Isaiah in the New Testament. That's how you spell it in the Greek. It says, which says, by hearing you shall hear, and you shall not understand, and seeing shall see, and shall not perceive. And it's something that Isaiah prophets. People will hear, but they won't understand. They'll see and not perceive. We talked about that before. It says, for this people's heart is waxed gross. There's so many things impairing their vision. And in verse 15, it says, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. So he says the key to being converted and healed, whole, being made whole, is hearing to a point of understanding and seeing to a point of perceiving. But he says when you allow so many things to contaminate your heart is gross and dull, so you can't hear and you can't see, so you don't understand. So you can't be converted into sons of God, into the fearfully and wonderfully made, the powerful people that's supposed to be dominating this earth. It's kind of hard to be converted. So you kind of have a surface God life. Like, you never cross over into anything supernatural or powerful. It's just all every day. Here we go again. We wake up at this time. We do this at this time. We do that at that time. Every once in a while we have a little shine. You know, we have a little trinket, but we're not experiencing a life of God, because if your hearing and your perception is dull, you can't, we talked about it the other week, John chapter 3, except you're born again, you can't enter or see the kingdom of God. And so we want to enter and see the kingdom of God. And you have to understand how the system works. And to understand how the system works, you have to be able to hear. So this is the key. Your ears are dull with what you want God to say, so you can't hear the truth of what he's actually saying. So when you allow so many things to corrupt your perception, you start to make up things. Just like when we really don't believe God, people come to the altar as the church grows. We have an altar call. We'll have to, as we, actually I got to remember to do it today, you pray for people to be healed, and people come up, and some people don't really believe God. So they don't believe God. It's like, so they kind of fake it, fall and do all types of stuff, because they don't give God a time to his power to overtake, because they don't believe in the power. So since they don't believe in the power, they don't experience the power. And that's what happens. People get to the point where they'll go in their prayer closet, they won't even take the time to hear God. They'll just start making up stuff. So what goes up in their head is what they want God to say. So let's say they're emotionally connected to a relationship, and they know they need to get out of it. They go into the prayer closet, God, I'm praying, about this relationship. I know you want me in the relationship, and I know you want this thing to happen. So, I just want to pray, just you bless this thing. You praying, you already dictating what you want to hear. You're not going in blanket. Like when you go into your boss's office and you want to get a raise, you don't know what he's going to say. So you're listening, hoping he says you get the raise. If you talk to your coach or you talk to your teacher, you talk to your parent, you're hoping to get what you want, but you ain't going in there just telling yourself what you want to hear. But that's what happens when you get dull. You just start making up stuff, and then you walk out and tell people that's what God said. Because you didn't hear what God said, because your hearing is so dull, you have to conjure up communication from God. Isaiah 64. The life of God is real, just hard for people to connect to the realness of it, because they live so much of their life conformed to this the temporary, this fake world. And so when it comes to the things of God, it's just so hard to believe, because you're caught up in the matrix. That's why Scripture says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed. Be not conformed, but transformed. So Isaiah 64, starting with verse 4, it says, for since the beginning of the world, men have not heard. For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither has the eye seen, O God, beside thee, what he has prepared for him that waiteth on him, for him. Thou meetest him that rejoices and worketh righteousness, those that remember thee in thy ways. Behold, thou art wroth, for we have sinned in those in continuance, and we shall be saved. So it says, from the beginning, the world have not heard nor perceived, by the ear neither have I seen. And it says, no one has been so connected with God. They have seen what he's prepared for us that wait on him. It says, but God meets those, he connects with those, and rejoices in those that work righteousness, and that remember him in all our ways. So God's bothered that we've allowed contamination and compromise to come between his connection with us. God said, if you just walk in righteousness, you'll hear from me clearly, and you'll see all the things that I have prepared for you, and that will be your incentive to stay out of trouble. Sometimes we compromise because we don't think we have nothing to lose. And the reason we don't think we have nothing to lose is because we can't see what God has for us. And the reason why we can't see it because we're dull, because we've allowed ourselves to be conformed to the world with compromise, corruption, and chaos. And then Isaiah 6 is the reference for Matthew, so I'll just give it to you since I'm in Isaiah. Isaiah 6, 9, it says, and he said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not. See ye indeed, but perceive not. It says, make the heart of this people fat, make their eyes heavy, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes. It said, make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert to be healed. So it says that that's the whole deception. What the perception is that what he said was people start to go through stuff, and when they start to take on corruption and craziness, they don't see with their eyes, they don't perceive. Well, seeing is what we do when we open our eyes, but perception is when you start to look beyond just the natural stuff. Even as you start to read through books. There's a movie called Mercury Rising. And it's an old movie, and what they did was NASA created this code. And it was an unbreakable code, but they wanted to test it. So what they did was they put the code in a puzzle book, in like a, kind of like a word find book where you just find the words. But the way it was set up is, if you could get this puzzle, then you would call this number, but you wouldn't know to call the number unless you, what's it called? If it's encrypted, you gotta what? Decrypt it? Is it decrypted? So you had to decrypt the code, but it was like all the greatest scientists in the world created this code. But they put it in like a basic, like 11-year-old, 10-year-old puzzle book. So this kid grabs the book, you know, he gets the book from the store, and I don't know if I think it was he that Asperger's or he was autistic, and he picks the book up, and as soon as he looked at the book, the code jumped out at him. And so what he did is he went downstairs, and because the code said dial this number, so he went downstairs, he dialed the number, and the number comes into the hotline, the warning line in NASA. So they sit around kicking and laughing, and they look at the computer and it's warning, somebody's calling in. And so they're like, who is this? And he said, and the kid said something. The kid was autistic, so he knew how to say his name and his address. That's all he knew. So it's Jeremy and whatever. And he's like, how did you get this number? You know, he couldn't answer all those questions. He would just say, Jeremy at such and such address. So they panicked because no one's supposed to break this national security code. But he would look in it, look at the paper, and perceive. And and actually when I was young, that's what I would do. They would always have puzzles on the back of the cereal boxes. I could just look at them, and I can take care of the code right away. And that's what perception is. Perception is, see, what that young man did, he saw the code, but then because he was able to perceive, he actually decrypted the code. And actually that's how our life is. Our life is, even when we look into the Word, some people look into the Word and it's confusing to them. So they see the words, but they can't perceive the revelation. And the reason why they can't perceive the revelation is because they've allowed their hearing and their perception to be dull. That's wax gross and dull. And see, so that's why it's kind of hard for us to hear from God.